Is that a gram?
New card. What do you think?
Whoa. Very nice. Look at that.
Picked them up from the printers yesterday.
Good coloring.
That's bone. And the lettering is something called Cillian Braille.
It's very cool, Bateman, but that's nothing. Look at this.
That is really nice.
Eggshell with Romalian type. What do you think?
Nice. Jesus. That is really super. How'd a nitwit like you get so tasteful?
I can't believe that Bryce prefers Van Patten's card to mine.
But wait. You ain't seen nothing yet. Raised lettering. Pale nimbus. White.
Impressive. Very nice. Let's see Paul Allen's card. Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God. It even has a watermark.
Thinking about, is it Nick Weiger who went to college and was just like, I'm gonna do a voice, and just did a voice for a whole year, and then it was like,
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I can't keep doing this.
He thought he'd change the way he talked and just reinvent himself on the first day of freshman year. A bold move.
Anyway, sorry to derail you.
No, that's fine. It's good to derail me. This podcast is all about being derailed. Welcome to another episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I'm here as always with my co-host Anthony. Will show you a good time, Maddox.
I will show you a good time. Yep.
It's a soy sauce joke.
That's a good one. Good
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, I like that.
If you want to hear more about Anthony's homemade soy sauce, you got to join the Patreon. You got to pay up, sucker. If you join the Lucky Paper Patreon, you get access to a whole second bonus podcast, which is Anthony and I talking about
Soy sauce.
anything we want, as long as it is not Magic the Gathering, because this podcast is the one where we talk about Magic the Gathering. So, most recent episode all about Anthony's forays into soy sauce, dalliances with soy sauce.
First batch of homemade soy sauce on the books or in the bottle, and it's
You spoiled it. Now no one's going to pay to listen to the episode now because they heard it turned out.
sorry. Beep that, Matthew.
yeah, Matthew. Edit out how Anthony said the soy sauce turned out. I thought it'd be fun, Anthony, to do a follow-up episode to an episode we did in August of 2022, so almost 4 years ago, titled Cards That Are Cool. And on this episode, we just looked at all of the cards that you and I each both played in our regular cube and Bun Magic cube, respectively, at the time. Mm-hmm. Two cubes of pretty different power level, but still had a lot of overlap. I believe it was 40 or 50 cards that were in both, not including fixing lands, which we had, obviously some overlap there, but that's not as interesting. I thought it'd be fun to do a spiritual successor to this episode. However, we can't really do a successor in the same style for a couple of reasons. One reason is that, the regular cube just hasn't changed probably since this episode came out. Maybe a couple changes.
Well, I look at the cube and I make all the assessments that I can in the same rigorous manner, and I determine that it's still perfect.
Still perfect,
so I'm
exactly.
still making the updates. It's just no changes.
There you go. That is a distinction that's important to make. The other thing I think is a bigger change, though, is that at the time we recorded this episode, we really kind of only had our one respective cube each. We each had very small side projects. You had experimented with a mono black cube. I think I was tinkering with the Degenerate Micro cube, but when it came to playing normal and big air quotes Magic, we had a cube each, and so it was easy to say, well, we each have a cube. What are the cards that are in both of our cubes?
Not to derail you again, but there are still 66 cards shared between those two cubes.
Yeah,
which is more than I expected.
I wouldn't expect it to have changed. You didn't change the cube again.
But you changed your cube. So.
I've changed my cube a little bit, yeah. So yes, that was derailing. Success. Good job. Anyway, these days, you and I do not just have one cube apiece that we play for normal Magic reasons. I have many more cubes these days I think about that are normal Magic adjacent, right? Like Sacred Geometry, definitely normal Magic. Neoclassical cube, normal Magic with a slight twist. My new Take 5 cube, it's not normal, but it's way closer to normal than the Degenerate Micro cube or the mono black cube. It's still just kind of you open packs of Magic, you draft, you play a deck, you pick a couple colors and you stick with it and it's fine. So I think the spiritual successor to cards that are in both of our cubes is instead cards that, at least for me, have been popping up in a lot of the different cubes I've designed, despite having slightly different design goals. There's a whole suite of cards that have like shown up in both Take 5 and even 100 Ornithopters and Sacred Geometry that I think are just interesting cards that I keep coming back to as a cube designer. I keep coming back to these cards as like, these just fit a lot of roles. They are cool. They're fun. They're the kinds of things I want people to be doing when they're playing a cube. And yeah, I wanted to cover some of those. And so for you, I was kind of like, well, you haven't really... I mean, you haven't designed a cube that you can't talk about. So you've got a whole cube that we can't talk about.
That's true. That'll be revealed. It'll be revealed too soon. I started sorting some cards out. I'm doing the work.
But you haven't exactly been in a flurry of designing cubes, and so I wouldn't expect you to have the same sort of cards that I'm talking about in terms of like packages I keep coming back to in recent cube designs of, you know, cards I really like and are fitting a lot of different design contexts. So I kind of prompted you to say, like, what are some cards that you've just really enjoyed playing with and could see yourself including in cubes were you to design them?
Yeah, and I'm still obviously playing a ton of different cubes. We have all kinds of different environments in our local play group, and looking through just like my deck list, the things that I drafted, there are definitely some patterns and like specific cards that come up again and again that I'm like, this is kind of a cool card. I could definitely see myself building a cube around this, but either for power level reasons or just like it needs some really specific environment or specific other cards context to make that card work. So it's not something that I could just throw into regular cube, but definitely something that is a little bit inspiring. So I think this is a helpful exercise for me.
I think we should start with you. I don't think we should alternate because I feel like we're gonna like have a story told for each of our sort of selections. So why don't you take it away? What is the first card you think is cool in 2026?
Okay, so this is a card with 2 bonuses because there are 3 cards that I often see in cubes together. This is Botanical Brawler. It is green and a white for a 0/0 with trample, enters with 2 1/1 counters, and whenever you put a counter on another permanent, you also put a counter on Botanical Brawler.
This is a very Anthony-coded card.
It's such an Anthony card, and that's the thing, is they're just like, here is the Selesnya card. It has counters. It gets more counters. Do the counter thing. It just screams, do the thing you want to do. And even though I feel like they're pandering a little bit, I gotta say, this card does seem kind of cool to me. And there are 2 other cards I mentioned that I feel like I see very often in cubes as kind of a package, partly because they came out at a similar time, but they just like scream, do this particular strategy. And those are Sovereign Okanek Ahwao. I think I did that perfectly. This is a 4-mana 3/4 with Ward 2, and essentially whenever it attacks, all your creatures that have greater power than their base power get that many additional +1/+1 counters. And Kutzil, Malamet Exemplar, this is a 3-mana 3/3, and whenever your creatures with greater power than their base power deal combat damage to your opponent, you draw a card. So these cards together sort of form this package that says, make things bigger, put equipment on them, put +1/+1 counters on them, cast a pump spell, and then deal damage to your opponent, and you're gonna get rewarded. When I see them in cubes, I do want to draft them and put them into my decks.
Especially the Kutzil and Sovereign guys, the 2 cat guys.
Right.
They remind me so much of Baird, Argivian Recruiter.
For sure,
And
yeah.
I think Baird is still probably our mutual favorite of that category of cards, which is a card that pays you off for a variety of things with a very simple line of text, like power greater than its base power pays you off for equipments, pays you off for auras, pays you off for +1/+1 counters, pays you off for prowess, pays you off for, combat tricks. Like it pays you off for like a ton of things with like one little line of text, which is very, very cool. The 2 cats, I think, are both Sovereign. I think is especially powerful. Like it's kind of crazy if you have a board that, would be good with Baird, you get a single token at the end of the turn. If you have a board that's good with the cat, you might play it, attack, and get like 6 or 8 additional power immediately on board, which is kind of crazy. They're also just like kind of, I feel like, a little clunkier payoffs than Baird is in ways that are maybe hard to explain, but they read a little less cleanly.
Yeah, I agree. So, I think the pros here is, as you're mentioning, there is actually a lot of flexibility in having like, okay, well, there's a little bit of an equipment theme in one color and a little bit of, prowess theme in red, maybe. Maybe you're playing like a red-white prowess deck, but then you're splashing green for this. Like, there's a lot of interesting ways that can come together because of that open-endedness of just power greater than its base power. And, Botanical Brawler is kind of the signpost card for this because it just has that naturally without doing anything extra. So it's like the entry point to, okay, now I'm doing this, and fail case, at least I have some creatures that work, even if I don't draw like my A+B creature plus equipment. But I agree, the knock on it is these cards are worded in kind of clunky ways. I simplified them a little bit, but you get those only once per turn clauses, and Kutzil also has this clause of your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. So I feel like that's a pretty big knock against it, and definitely if I'm putting these into an environment, I would want to surround them with cards that are simple as much as possible, because I feel like I really like to think about that idea of a complexity budget and not putting too much complexity in a cube. And maybe it's worth investing that in a couple specific cards that just do something really unique or like really powerful payoffs for that. The other big knock on these cards to me is just they are a little bit swingy. Like, this is literally a 2/3/4 mana cost card, and if you just curve these out, it's kind of insane, but if you don't have anything in play, they don't really do much. So that would be the other thing I would be thinking about. Is like, okay, are there ways to make these cards a little bit more incremental? Is there like a small creature with evasion that does this, where it's like, okay, I can still manage to draw one card or get a couple extra counters somewhat consistently, and not just like, oh yeah, I'm literally curving Botanical Brawler into, now this is a 6/6 with trample that's going to draw me a card when it hits you, and that's kind of insane.
Botanical Brawler does seem like a perfect regular cube card, but I can see exactly why you haven't decided to include it.
Yeah, and it's also tough because I just love all the green-white cards, and so choosing this over something that is a little bit more classic and iconic, or, you know, maybe just nostalgic for me, honestly, is a little bit difficult.
Obviously, the reason you've chosen not to include it is that it doesn't have plant on the type line, despite being Botanical Brawler.
You know, I was literally just looking at that type line. Yeah, what's up with that? Interesting
I assume
choice.
it didn't have plant creatures on March of the Machine.
March of the Machine. No plants. It's all about machines. All right, the next one I have on my list, and this is another card that just is like, I don't know. This is, I think, maybe true for a number of these cards that I thought were cool, is they're kind of weird, and they just sort of get your gears turning and think about how do you actually use this card. And so this next one I picked is Rot-Cursed Rakshasa. This is 2 mana for a 5/5 with Trample and Decayed, which means it can't block, and when it attacks, you have to sacrifice the end of combat. But it also has an ability you can use from the graveyard, X black black, exile this card from your graveyard, and put a Decayed counter on X target creatures, activate only as a sorcery. This card is kind of hard to evaluate because it's like, okay, well, it's a 2 mana 5/5, great, but I only get to use it once, and then I can potentially put a bunch of Decayed counters on things, but it's not necessarily as obvious how to use it. But when you actually play with it, it's like, okay, well, this is really cool because I put it in early, get some damage in, and then now I have both the flexibility to either remove some of your opponent's creatures, like it can be defensive to say, you can attack me with these creatures, but only once, and then you lose them, which can be a pretty big deterrent or like swing a game. But more importantly, the things with Decayed cannot block, so I think the more typical way to use it is you're going to get in damage and then keep putting on that damage and then have a big turn where you can prevent all of your creatures' opponents from blocking. And it's a really interesting kind of, I guess, black aggro card, but just operates on different angles than like red aggro cards, which I think is really cool.
I played this in the Bud Magic Cube for a little while, and I still do not know how to evaluate this card. I still look at it and I think this has to be kind of nuts because it's, again, a 2 mana 5/5 with Trample, but your opponents never want to block because it only gets to attack once anyway.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a ball lightning almost in that sense. But
and
like
another card that is cool.
But like a really efficiently costed ball, like ball lightning is red for 6 damage. That, you know, this is 1 black for 5 damage. Obviously, it doesn't have haste, but, you know, a similar sort of costing there, which I think makes this look appealing. And I keep thinking that the renew ability from the graveyard that puts K counters on things has to be kind of nuts also. It just does so much stuff. And yet, I did not make waves in the Bud Magic Cube, and I ended up cutting it just to make room for another random black aggro 2-drop that I wanted to try instead. And so I still don't really know how to evaluate this. If you are listening and you've gotten in a lot of reps with Rot-Cursed Rakshasa, sound off in the comments and let us know how we should be evaluating this card on power level.
Yeah, I mean, I've played it to success, like using it exactly that way that we described in, I want to say, the Red Terror, and that was kind of fun, but like the deck around it was a little bit clunky, like I didn't have enough efficient stuff at the low end of my curve, but it definitely, I saw some potential there. There's also just ways to abuse the fact that it is a 2 mana 5/5, right? Like there's lots of things that will just trigger off having a large creature, and that could be another sort of angle in addition to this like obvious aggro angle, some kind of like pay you off for having a bunch of big creatures. And even if you don't want to attack with it, it can't block, but it could just sit there and play, interacting with whatever static effects you have that care about big creatures.
Or you attack with it and then you exile it to Verol's the Scar Striped.
You know I was thinking about that.
I'm always thinking about Verol's the Scar Striped.
About Verol's. What's up with that guy? All right, next card I have, and this card is obviously cool, is Oni-Cult Anvil. This is from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. This is black and red for an artifact, and it's got just a bunch of little tricky text. Whenever one or more artifacts you control leave the battlefield during your turn, create a 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature token. It only triggers once each turn. You can also tap and sacrifice an artifact. Oni-Cult Anvil deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. I think it's a little bit ironic that I'm bringing up this card after we just talked all about board stalls last week, because this card is just like the board stall card. I just want to get into a state in a game with this card where I'm continually triggering this and sacrificing my little guys and making new guys and stealing your life like a little bit at a time. But that is really fun to me to try and like build this engine with this card. And similarly, it also just interacts with so many different things. So like if you have one other artifact to sacrifice, it kind of gets its own engine going. You don't necessarily need a lot of fuel, but you still can sacrifice other artifacts and still end up getting more 1/1s. So obviously you have your Ichor, which is the good one, Ichor Slick and Ichor Wellspring, and other little trinkety artifacts, your Chromatic Stars that you can sacrifice and still draw extra cards from it while getting this engine going. I think this is just like one of the most fun little build-arounds for an artifacty deck. Should I talk about things I don't like about it?
Well, I mean, I think this card is a beloved card.
Yeah.
I know a ton of cubes include this card, and I feel like it's the kind of card that pops up a lot in my Scryfall searches, and it like seems like an obvious inclusion in a lot of my own cubes, but I have not included it anywhere, and I suspect maybe for similar reasons that you're about to say.
Well, no, I mean, I do kind of like that engine-y, I'm going to work for a board stall, because it also is damaging your opponent. Like, it is a real win condition slowly. So that's not the issue I have with it. I honestly just have struggled with the templating of it a little bit. Like the fact that it is so open-ended, it's like worded in a way that can interact with a lot of other cards is cool. It does come at the cost of, especially the fact that the first ability, it ends saying it only triggers once each turn, but you might have missed earlier when it only says, but it's only your turn as well. And that's the part that often I forget and like gets me confused, or took me a while to just get used to the mechanics of the card, that you're not doing this on blockers, which honestly is probably a good thing, that you're not blocking
it is better,
and then making a new one. Like, it's probably better for gameplay
level,
that it
yeah.
works that way, but it does just trip people up a little bit. And there's definitely games where it's like, oh shit, that only triggers at sorcery speed. Do you mind if I had done that now that I have done this? And that's the nice thing about Cube, that we can kind of like, if you misunderstand the cards, roll back some things and fix it. But, you know, that's obviously not ideal either. So that's the one knock against it, but it's a card that whenever I see in a pack, and I agree, I also see this in a ton of cubes, just always sparks that like, okay, what am I going to do with this? Can I build this engine? And I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think the templating is kind of rough, especially the fact that it has like just a tap and sacrifice ability that doesn't say activate this only at sorcery speed, but effectively you do always want to activate at sorcery speed because you always want to do it on your turn.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I think it was actually, who was I talking to about this? Was it Max? Somebody pointed out that there was never any reason to hold up your activation of Scrabbling Claws until the end of your opponent's turn. You should always do it at the end of your turn, just always.
Right, because
I'm
they
talking
actually
about
have
the tap
they have less choices at that point.
Right, like you always, like there's no reason to like wait for them to put more cards in their graveyard to give them less choices, and if they're going to like delve stuff away to be left with a card after the fact, like they would have had one less card, they would have had to delve away anyway.
I'm haunted by a specific moment. Man, it's scary how much this stuck with me, I guess. At the Salt Box playing against Julian, not doing that, and then him casting Treasure Cruise, me being like, yep, lesson learned, Scrabbling Claws, just use it while you got it.
Yeah, just basically like pretend the tap clause on Scrabbling Claws says activate only as a sorcery. It's actually better if you play it that way for the most part. So this card kind of has that same invisible text where it's like you really always want to be activating this on your turn, save for some very weird, external circumstances.
And I mean, it's cool that those edge cases do come up. So I don't know, like it's always a balance.
Yeah, and I think this card is, I would argue maybe that like a Richard Garfield would call this card like overbalanced. Like it is very tuned to like be just right, not be too much to play with in terms of like its balance. Only triggering once a turn, only on your turn. Like those kinds of limiting factors make this card fine in terms of like power level, but it does make it clunky to play with and harder to read. And for my part, as the board stall disliker on the pod, yeah, this card for sure not only leads to board stalls, but it does then pay you off once you're in a board stall in a way that I think can be very slow and grinding. Like you are winning the game, but you're not winning the game quickly, and your opponent I think can be in a really sort of unfun place of just like, all right, well now I gotta play against Oni-Cult Anvil, and they're gonna be draining me for life every single turn. It gains them life as well, so if I had them like close to like being killed by a burn spell, they're gonna like crawl out of that hole pretty quickly too. And then just the endless stream of chump blockers, and yeah, it's a lot.
It's interesting you mention our friend Max, because I feel like he is definitely the board stall enjoyer. Like solving that like really puzzly complex board state is all about, like that's the kind of magic he really enjoys. I don't know, I wonder if we should do a board stall addendum with him at some point.
Board stalls may be cool.
Maybe they're good actually.
But I think his card is undeniably cool, whether you like it for what it does to games or not. Like it is a cool card that it shows up in a lot of cubes for a good reason.
So cool. And even like the illustration, I'm going to give it a little half point for that. Very cool. All right, next up, I got to choose something a little simpler because we got some complicated cards here. Fear of Isolation, 2 and a blue for a 2/3 flyer. As an additional cost to cast a spell, return it to its owner's hand.
No, not return it to its owner's hand.
What?
Just read the card instead of trying to summarize it. You said, as additional cost to cast the spell, return it to its owner's hand.
Return a permanent you control to its owner's hand.
Yeah, that's not what you said. You said return it to its owner's hand.
Oops.
It'd be crazy to return the spell you just cast to its owner's hand.
Okay, you're right. Sorry, it's hard to read. This is just Core Skyfisher in blue, and it's a nightmare. I don't know if that's relevant, but I love Core Skyfisher, and whenever I see this card in a cube, I'm like, hell yeah, there's a second Core Skyfisher I can play?
It's not actually Core Skyfisher, because Core Skyfisher's enter the battlefield ability instead of a cast trigger, or additional cost to cast. That is true. Which, better or worse? What do you think?
Totally situational. It's way worse. Well, it's also situational. I was going to say it's worse against counter spells, because if this gets countered, you've already paid the cost of returning a permanent to your hand. However, you might really want to do that. Like, that might be the value of the card. Core Skyfisher, obviously, if you want to be returning things to your hand, is much better with blink spells. So it's going to depend on context. I think this probably is slightly worse. Another thing that's cool about this is it is an enchantment, which is just another way if you're trying to do any kind of enchantment stuff. And that actually is maybe a big bonus for me, because there's a lot of constellation triggers, things where you want to be casting enchantments repeatedly. So this also, like, slotting more into an environment that cares about replaying your enchantments gives it a little bump over Skyfisher, I think. No, I can't. Core Skyfisher is cooler.
I think you and I are both big Core Skyfisher enjoyers. I have to confess, I think this card has much cooler art than Core Skyfisher.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
The returning something to your hand on ETB is such a white effect, but should it be white? I mean, at instant speed, I think it definitely should be, because then it's like, you know, kind of a rescue sort of thing, like the White Mane Lions of the world. Like, that makes total sense in white. Does that effect actually feel more blue if you, like, truly dig down deep and, like, think about the color pie and, like, what makes sense?
There's actually a fair amount of precedent for it in both colors, I guess. We all remember Rescuer Sphinx, right?
We all remember the great Rescuer Sphinx. I've got a foil sitting around here somewhere from my battle box.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot more precedent, I think, for it in blue. I mean, in white, but I agree it has that sort of, like, trickiness of, I'm just going to, like, do this repetitive action that feels a little bit more blue.
Yeah, I'm doing something to annoy you. You already did this once before, I'm going to do it again. That's the blue mage behavior.
How do you feel about the flavor of this? What does it mean, fear of isolation? How does it tie to the mechanics, if at all?
I mean, it definitely ties to the mechanics. Like, it's much more likely to be alone on the battlefield because you had to return a thing to put it into play.
Obviously. Now I feel stupid.
But yeah, I mean, whether it's a fear of, it's a stretch a little bit, but like, this thing requires you to, like, get rid of something else so it can be alone, and then it rewards you by being a little more powerful than you would expect at the mana cost, which I think is as close to, you know, a flavor win as we get, realistically.
Right. I'm sold. Another card I want to mention with this is Paradoxical Outcome. This is a 4-mana instant. Return any number of target non-land, non-token permanents you control to their owner's hands. Draw a card for each card returned to your hand this way. This is a card I do have experience playing with, but pretty much only in the Turbo Cube, where it's just like a storm payoff that you pick up a bunch of trinkety artifacts and draw a million cards. Have you played Paradoxical Outcome as more like a fair card in any context? Because the more I was thinking about Fear of Isolation, I'm like, this card, like, if you just pick up a creature and draw a card that was like blocking or re-trigger some effect, like, can Paradoxical Outcome actually just be a reasonable middle card, not just this like super extreme hyper turbo card?
I'm really glad you asked, because when I made my list of cards that I've been putting in a lot of cubes, it was longer than 5 cards, and Paradoxical Outcome was on the sort of bonus list of, like, I've also been putting this in a bunch of cubes, rather, but it's not quite in my top 5 most favorite. I play 100 Ornithopters. Obviously, those, like...
Makes perfect sense there.
Well, I think obviously the sort of, like, you know, thing you're supposed to do with it is do the same thing you do in the Turbo Cube. You have a bunch of 0 mana cost permanents and all the Ornithopters. You're supposed to play a bunch, draw a million cards, play them all again. More often than you maybe expect, though, that card is actually mostly played to, like, well, I'm actually going to pick up this Ichor Wellspring and this Saga. And, like, that's actually mostly what I'm doing with this. And maybe I got an extra, you know, Ornithopter in there to draw a card or something. But the fact that you pick up other stuff with it in that cube has been very relevant. So relevant to the point that I have added Leave to Chance in that cube as well, which is an Aftermath card where Leave is 1 and a white for an instant that says you can return any number of permanents you own to your hand, just because that effect has been really strong. I mean, the chance part of that card is like gravy, like it doesn't really matter that much. And for Sunforger reasons, I wish it wasn't attached to it so you could actually get Leave with Sunforger, because otherwise it's got a mana value of 6.
Aftermath has total. Weird.
Yeah, so it's a 6 mana card, so you can't get it with Sunforger, which is a bummer.
Is that why Sunforger's on your screen right now?
Nope, that's a different reason. But yeah, I think like fair Paradoxical Outcome is like completely reasonable, and I have also been playing with it in Take 5, where it is definitely a card you have to play fairly. Like there's not a bunch of 0 mana stuff in that cube, and there you're playing it to like reset a morph thing, or to like, you know, draw a couple cards because you played some dinky stuff that you'd rather just like turn into card draw to have to replay it. Like it's a tempo hit for a card advantage gain. It's a cool card that it like in fair context lets you turn tempo into card advantage, which is interesting because it lets you like change your strategy a little bit, where maybe you're like, well, I'd rather have a board presence right now because I need like the tempo advantage, but then you could just reset your board presence to turn that into card advantage and then follow up with a board wipe or something. Like,
right, yeah.
I think it's a really, really cool card that has way more homes and more cubes than people think. I think people see it and immediately think, this is a vintage card.
Right.
This is for returning Moxen and Black Lotus or whatever, and if I'm not doing that, it's not worth it. Certainly that is where it's at its most powerful, but I think this card could have a home in many more cubes, and it is like in that perfect sweet spot of like, it is mechanically simple, it interacts with a lot of different things, it offers a cool build around potential, and I think this is a really awesome card, and it was on my short list that just didn't quite make my top 5.
That's exactly my question is there, like, okay, maybe I put this in a random cube, and according to the time-traveling supercomputer, it's a pretty good card, but will people just overlook it completely and it never gets played because they think of it in this much more narrow lens?
I think some people will, but as a cube designer, you have to accept that, like, in every draft, there's going to be some people that are going to overlook stuff because they have a bunch of biases around, you know, where cards belong and where they ought to be played. And there's also going to be players in almost every draft that are going to be, like, the players that are very open-minded, and they're going to be like, you know what, actually, I think this can be broken here, and I'm going to, like, try and prove it for better or worse. And so I don't think as a designer it's super productive to like worry too much about how much that kind of bias is going to impact card viability.
Maybe I should just throw this in regular cube.
I think it'd be cool.
It would be a paradoxical card in that many people would look at it and be like, this card doesn't do anything, and some people would be like, this is insane, and I'm absolutely going to do that 1-2 punch of I'll pick up my board on your turn and then cast a Wrath. Could be interesting.
I don't think it would be insane, but I think it would be like a cool, like you would wheel it, I think, if you were in the blue deck. But I think when you wield it, you'd probably be maybe excited about it a fair amount of the time.
That could be cool. All right, I got one more cool card for you. This is pretty universally like cube people look at this card and they're like, there's something here. Reinforced Ronin. For 1 red, it is a 2/2 with haste. At the beginning of your end step, return Reinforced Ronin to its owner's hand. And 1 in a red, it has a channel ability, discard it, and draw a card. So basically cycling, but slightly different. This card, again, is just one of those things that touches on so many different mechanics. It's like, okay, well, is this just a really good aggressive card that I'm just going to cast and attack you with haste? Or is this a thing that's going to let me cast an artifact every single turn and have a bunch of things trigger for it? Or is this a thing that I'm mostly just going to discard and draw a card, and that's going to trigger my Drake Havens and all kinds of other effects? I don't know. I think a lot of people have asked these questions, and I've played it in a couple
Many
cubes,
people have asked.
and I've never really seen it be like, oh yeah, this is a key piece. I still have that reaction to it of like, there's something here to this card. We just need to find the right cube for it.
Like, it reminds me a little bit of Scrapwork Mutt. It is not as like generically...
Yeah, Scrapwork Mutt has just like such a like reasonable floor,
exactly.
But it does do the like interacts with lots of different mechanics on a simple card.
Yeah, and this also interacts with lots of different mechanics. I think the baseline mode is better than most people give it credit for. For those of us that have been playing Cube for, you know, years and years and years, I think the dash guy, the 1 mana 2/2 that can't block that has dash for 1 and a red from Cons of Tarkir. From Cons of Tarkir. Zurgo Bellstriker.
Oh, sure.
Zurgo Bellstriker is a card that I think is unassuming if you've never played with it before, and you think like, okay, I mean, this is obviously just a 1 mana 2/2, and that's good. And the amount of times that dash mode really, really matters comes up a lot, right? Like basically, if you're playing a red aggro deck and you have Bellstriker in your opening hand, but you have any other 1-drop, what it's almost universally always correct to do is just curve out with every other card in your hand, and then if you end up in a space where you have 2 extra mana a turn because you ran out of threats to deploy, just dashing this in turn over turn is so much better than just playing it, because your opponent might be like sitting on their board wipe, waiting for you to overcommit to the board, and you just keep playing this, or they have a sorcerer speed removal spell, and you just keep dashing this thing in. And so I think the baseline mode of...
They have a Wrath.
Exactly. I said that's the first thing I said.
Sorry, I was reading the internet.
The baseline mode of Reinforced Ronin just being like, if you curved out and now can just like also add a 2/2 every single turn repeatedly, I think is pretty strong for only 1 mana. And then all that other upside of like caring about casting artifacts every single turn, or caring about, you know, you just has cycling, you know, just a card like that with cycling essentially is like really strong. So yeah, I think that card's quite good. I've danced around it a little bit for Take 5 because it's in that similar space of like weirdo card that you're like, what exactly do I do with this? I haven't quite gotten there on it yet, but I've definitely considered it, and it might see play in Take 5 in the future.
I feel like there is the fact that the effectively cycling ability has a red pip in it a problem.
I don't think it's a problem. Like, I do try to include a fair number of cycling cards with generic mana costs so that you can, play them in off-color decks, but this would just be a red card. And honestly, like, one of my biggest lessons from that cube, which I'm a little surprised by, is that I think it's way easier than I expected to just draft a deck. And you and I have both played our local buddy Andrew's Resplendent Cube, which was inspired by the Ball Pit and Take 5 and is also a minimal deck building cube in that it is no deck building. You draft 4x10 and then just play the deck. No deck building at all, no cuts. And when I first saw the list, I was surprised because it didn't include any of the stuff that I was like so careful to include in Take 5. There was like no generic cycling. There was no morph. It was just like all colored cards with colored costs, and there's 17 lands per player, and so you have to just get the right number. And I was like, is this going to work at all? And it does. It just kind of works. And so my biggest takeaway from playing Take 5 over the past like 6 months is that like I think I over-indexed on like ways to make the conceit viable because I was worried that like people wouldn't get enough lands, people would have off-color cards, and that just happens way less than I expected it to. And so since playing it, I've like cut down on lands. I'm getting closer and closer to just like the Andrew approach of there's 17 per player, which also, if everyone knows that, it's kind of like a self-correcting thing. Like,
yeah,
if you're playing a Desert Cube where you're like, I don't know, you're going to get enough lands, and everyone like takes them really highly, and then they're like actually sought after and fought over. But if you tell everybody there's exactly 17 per player, like you probably don't want more, and you definitely don't want less, then people tend to end up with the right number of lands, which is kind of crazy. So anyway, I don't think it'd be a problem. It's a very long-winded answer to the question of, is it a problem that the channel cost has colored mana? And I think, no, it would be fine.
Yeah, I think that idea of like playing these really like weirdly color constrained environments and no deck building environments is deep. So let's just stick with these cool cards. Those are my 5 cool cards with bonuses.
Very cool. We love to hear it. My 5 cool cards. I'm going to go... What order should I go in? I'm just going to go in arbitrary order because I don't want to have to decide what order I like them in.
Least to most cool.
Least to most maybe would make sense, but I'm just going to go arbitrary because I don't feel like trying to make a judgment call right now which ones I like least or most. The first couple cards I want to mention here is a little package, kind of similar to the couple packages you mentioned, which is Second Sunrise, Face Reward, and Brought Back, which are all the like sort of eggs payoffs.
Okay, so you're going sicko mode on this.
Well, here's the thing. I don't actually think it's a sicko mode as you think. So each of these cards returns permanents that went to the graveyard this turn back to play under your control. Second Sunrise is symmetrical and does it for all. Brought Back only does it for 2, and Face Reward is not symmetrical, but it does just for you, and yeah, it costs a little more mana. So there's slight variations there, but the key is like, their instance, something goes to the graveyard this turn, you get to get it back for pretty cheap. I mean, Brought Back is white to get back any 2 things that went to the graveyard this turn from play. Obviously, they can't be like discard. I shouldn't say obviously. Maybe you're thinking otherwise. They have to go to the graveyard from play, and you get to get them back to play.
I mean, I have exactly the same question I have about these cards as with Paradoxical Outcome.
It's very similar.
I'm just familiar with these in this like really extreme context where you're really abusing them and like cycling a whole bunch of eggs. Or is that how you're seeing them, or is there more like a middle ground, a more like fair way to play these where it's just like, yeah, it just kind of does what it says in the tin?
I think both modes are completely reasonable ways to play these cards, and I think they're very cool for that reason. I will specifically call out Brought Back as a really cool one for the like fair mode, because it's not anywhere near as good if you're like doing some big combo thing, because you only get 2 things back, so it's hard to like turn it into like some massive combo engine. But in exchange, you get a like really nice, fairly costed card that also I think is the cleanest in terms of its name. Like Brought Back, yeah, I'm bringing the thing back. Like it just makes sense. Brought Back is really nice as a sort of fair option. But yeah, my path with these cards is I, in pretty early days of 100 Ornithopters, included Second Sunrise and Face Reward as a package. And it was meant definitely for, like, you're playing these with Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, Goblin Bombardment, whatever, and it's just a way to, like, get all your stuff back. Which is kind of funny because it doesn't actually have anything to do with the fact that they're Ornithopters, right? Like, you could be sacrificing any creatures to those effects and then get them all back with these, Second Sunrise or Face Reward. What the Ornithopters enable is, like, kind of tightening that loop. Like, if you're going to be playing creatures to the board and then having a big sacrifice turn, but you had to like cast all those creatures by like paying mana turn over turn and building up a board slowly to then go off, that's a very different texture than like I go from no board to playing a bunch of Ornithopters to sacrifice them to Goblin Bombardment to immediately getting them back with Face Reward. Like, let you kind of do it in like a very sort of constrained timescale. But it doesn't actually really have anything to do with Ornithopters directly. Like, it's a pretty distant connection to the central theme of the cube.
It's interesting you say that because you couldn't you say the same about, like, equipment? Equipment doesn't have anything to do with ornithopters because you could put it on something else. And these feel the same, where it's like, yeah, you could get back other things, but the things to get back are ornithopters. And I totally agree, like, the texture of the gameplay, because ornithopters are like this resource that you're moving between zones constantly in this cube. It all feels very cohesive to me.
Yeah, I think the vibes are right. I guess my point is, like, the equipment is, like, one step removed. Like, you need to augment your ornithopters to win. The equipment gives you a direct way to do that. It's like a direct answer to the question. Face Reward doesn't actually, like, these cards you need to pair with cards that you all, like, there's two steps removed there, right? Like, Goblin Bombardment is here because it's good with 100 ornithopters, and then because Goblin Bombardment and Phyrexian Altar and, you know, Ashnod's Altar and Blasting Station and KCI, because all those cards are good with ornithopters, then by proxy, these sort of egg cards become good as well. But they're kind of like, you know, one more step of remove. But I agree, even from the beginning, it just felt right on vibes. Like it was kind of the right sort of amount of unfair or whatever. And that's the main reason they're in the cube. I will admit that the, like, eggs deck comes together less frequently than I would like. I wish that it was more common that, like, a, like, eggs combo deck with these cards really went off, and I would say it happens maybe one in every, like, 8 drafts. Someone, like, really pulls off the whole sort of package and gets to do, like, Pitiless Carnage and to, like, sacrifice my whole board, including all my lands, and to, like, find my face reward from my deck and then cast it and get everything back and, like, go crazy. What they actually do in most drafts is very similar to what I mentioned with Paradoxical Outcome. They just, like, get back a Saga, get back, you know, some stuff that died to a board wipe, you know, because this is just an answer to a board wipe if your opponent wipes the board. I mean, Second Sunrise not so much because it gets their stuff back too, but if they chose to wipe the board, they probably had a worse board anyway, and so it's probably still worth it. But yeah, they've seen, actually, I think, by sheer quantity of play, like a much higher density of, like, fair play, and I think been still really fun and engaging. Like, I have personally played them in decks where I felt really good getting back a Lotus Bloom and a Saga, you know, for my Faith's Reward, which is, like, you're pretty happy to do that, generally speaking. You get to ramp a little bit, and you get your Saga back, and you start to get more sort of chapters on your Saga. They also made it into an early version of Take 5, which we haven't sort of explicitly said what all these cubes are about because there's too much explanatory stuff we have to provide to make any sense of this. But Take 5 is my environment that is very minimal deck building. Everyone's deck is pretty janky. Like, you don't get to do really, like, focused, lean things in that cube. I play the actual 5 eggs, you know, from Invasion or whatever in that cube, so you get to actually Apocalypse or whatever they're originally from. So you can, like, do that sort of eggs thing with the face reward there, but there's only 5 of them, and so, like,
come on, Wizards, please print the other 5 eggs. Everybody's asking for them.
Actually, I would kind of love that.
Me too.
But they would probably be they'd probably be like Ninja Turtle eggs or something, and so we wouldn't like it anymore.
Never mind. No one wants them. We got Sungrass Egg. That's all we need.
So in that cube, they're perfect cards because they do exactly what I want the cards to do in that cube, which is they offer you this ambitious dream to live, but most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you're going to fall back to kind of trying to figure out how to get any value out of them, right? Like, that is kind of a sweet spot for what I want cards to be doing in that cube, where it's like, yes, you can try and live the, you know, no land deck with Goblin Charbelcher dream if you want, but mostly you're going to fall back to, like, Charbelcher's going to do 2 to 6 damage every time I activate it. And, like, can that be good enough? Maybe. That's the kind of texture I want in this cube. And every time I see these cards in decks, every time I draft them, every time I see them in play, they, like, just are in a very cool space, like Paradoxical Outcome, where they, like, interact with a bunch of different cards. You can, like, sequence to, like, find cool ways to get value out of them. You can, like, bluff attacks to get value out of them. You can pair them with all kinds of cards to, like, do cool stuff. And they also kind of have this interesting, like, big swing on the game potentially, where, like, it might seem like a bunch of bad stuff really happened, but then you, like, get this kind of reset button that, like, does something very cool. So I would especially put a big pin in Brought Back for fair context, and playing it in these things, maybe consider, like, is Brought Back a Bun Magic card? And it might be. I could see a world where I play Brought Back in Bun Magic just because it's really good to bring 2 things back for 2 mana. It's great.
Sure. I mean, it's also any permanent type, so I feel like it is some, like, redundancy in defense. Oh, and fetch lands too. I was just going to say in combo decks, if you, like, really need a way to foil removal spells for your critical artifact or enchantment, it'll save you there.
Yeah, these all work with fetch lands as a baseline. So if you're in a cube with fetch lands, then bare minimum, you get to, like, ramp a little bit when you cast this, and that's paired with whatever else you're doing with it. I'll also give a little shout out here to Lotus Bloom, which is a card that has now found its way into a couple of my cubes, which is the Black Lotus with Suspend, which is obviously great with these cards. It is just Black Lotus once it's in play, because it goes between your graveyard and play, never hits Suspend again. You just have a Black Lotus now you can get back with these different eggs, which is very cool. It's also very cool with, like, Goblin Welder, Tameshi kind of decks that can, like, you know, put it into play from the graveyard without having to, again, put it on Suspend. So I've had a lot of fun putting Lotus Bloom in some cubes where it's like, figure out how to make this Black Lotus. Like, the baseline, like, sort of version of this card is, like, pretty rough. Like, it's okay in your opening hand. Maybe it like lets you have an explosive turn 4 or whatever, but it's really not like a great card on its base rate, but it gives you a big payoff if you like figure out what to do with it. The second card on my list here, which is again in no particular order, is actually the reason I want to record this episode, and it is a card that has been in the regular cube, I think, since it was printed, that I have recently added to the Bun Magic cube, which is a crazy arc for a card to follow from, being a regular cube staple to seeing play in many of my other cubes to finally coming full circle and being added to the Bun Magic cube.
Is it Elvish Reclaimer?
No, it's been in the Bun Magic cube forever.
Okay.
It is Fists of Flame.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned this. That's very funny to me.
Fist of Flame, the more I put this card in cubes, play it in other cubes, the more I think about it, the more I think it is like a perfect Magic card. Just like perfect. It's 1 and a red, draw a card, target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn for each card you've drawn this turn at instant speed. You
heard it here first.
You made a gesture.
The perfect card, according to Andy Mangold, is a combat trick. You love to see it.
It is a perfect Magic card. It truly is. It gives trample too, which I didn't mention. I should have just read the card. That's why I tell you always to read the card instead of summarize it, because it's so easy to miss something. It gives trample as well.
Trample's important,
Trample's
especially
really important.
in 100 Ornithopters.
Yeah, so this is a card that I've played in the regular cube for years, and I'm like, this is, among all the combat tricks, this is by far one of my favorites. And just to say why, because I know, the combat trick proxy war is going on many years. The combat trick Cold War is many years going on in this podcast. My chief complaint about like quintessential combat tricks, your giant growths or whatever, is that they have a really bad floor, and that means that they're like high ceiling. It's often kind of obvious when you get that like spot to cast it, because normally it's pretty bad, and so when you get a spot where it's actually good, you just feel like, great, I finally made this card good when it was going to be so bad for the rest of the game. And that sort of like dichotomy of it's mostly bad, but then sometimes incredible is something that bums me out very often when I'm playing against those cards, because I'm like, I don't want to make a decision that then makes this card that was bad in your hand now incredible, and that feels bad to me. Drawing a card means that the floor of Fist of Flame is just so much better, and you will just like cash this in, in a random combat like pretty happily, because you get some more damage in, you get to draw a card, and you get to like just keep your deck doing its thing. Find your next land drop, like just churn away your cards. So
I mean, you can even worst case scenario, your opponent has a creature, end of turn, cycle it. Basically,
you can just cycle it, which is fine. The fact that it draws a card is a big bonus on this card for me, and I really do think it scales with power level in a really interesting way. I put it in 100 Ornithopters, and it turned out to be basically a combo card. Like, I have tags on 100 Ornithopters for which cards are partial win cons and full win cons, and my like vibes-based distinction there is that like a full win con means that this could theoretically be the only card in your deck that killed somebody, and you would be like, you could kill your opponent with it. And a partial win con is like, you're not ever going to like solo somebody with this card in a game.
On its face, it does 2 damage one time.
Right, like Snakeskin Veil, not a full win con. Like, you're never going to kill somebody with just now, is it theoretically possible? Sure, they could have no blockers for the rest of the whole game and never answer your one Ornithopter with a single counter on it, but like, I have this like vibes-based, like, intuition distinction, just so I can like get a gut sense for like, how many full and partial win cons I have. And Fist of Flame is the rare card that I've tagged with both, because in some applications it is just clearly not a full win con, because you just get +2 or +3 power, you deal some damage, draw a card, and that's fine. That's like one application of the card. What it has actually mostly been is like a combo payoff. It's like you're playing a Jeskai Ascendancy combo deck, you draw your deck in a turn, and then you need a way to give trample and like buff all of his power, and then you just get to hit it with a Fist of Flame.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's kind of a perfect card, because the result of, I drew my whole deck, what do I do now? Well, I cast this card that pays me off for drawing my whole deck, and it also, in that context, you only need one copy of it in the deck, and you will find it if your whole deck is about draw the whole deck.
Right, and Jeskai Ascendancy is maybe not even the best example, because that also buffs your Ornithopters, so like it gives the trample, which is kind of important, but like it also turns Glimpse of Nature into a win condition. Like if you have a deck that is designed to, in the mid game, Glimpse of Nature into Hurkyl's Recall, into Castle your Ornithopters again to draw more cards, like you can just turn that with a haste enabler into a win condition with Fist of Flame. And so it has actually mostly been like a combo payoff in that cube. And
cast a couple time spirals.
There's no time spiral in 100 Ornithopters. There's a Mind's Desire. Is that what you're thinking of?
No, I'm just thinking about time spiral.
You're just thinking about a thing that you
Stuff
can't do
you can
in this
do
cube.
with it.
But I'm adding it to my most powerful, most removal dense, most cutthroat cube, the Bun Magic cube, because that cube is also full of card advantage, full of cantrips, and I think it's not unreasonable in that cube that it's going to be like +6/+0, and trample for like 2 mana, which is a crazy powerful card. I think it genuinely is going to hang there like perfectly reasonably, even though it's like a really cutthroat, power-focused environment. Again, the more I play with this card, the more I'm like, you can put this card anywhere. It just works, and it smooths games out. It draws cards. It it makes less games just kind of like fizzle because someone's mana screwed or like can't find action or whatever. And I love it. Consider Fists of Flame for your cube. It is so good.
Incredible. I also honestly really love that it just buffs power. I think that combat tricks, like if you cast Giant
Agreed.
Growth and I'm choosing whether or not to block, it's like, well, do I want to trade with your Giant Growth if you have it and just like lose my creature? Whereas Fist of Flame, it's like, okay, I'm still making a trade here and you're getting through some damage. Like there's kind of a more interesting dynamic there in some ways. I mean, I also love Giant Growth, obviously, but that variety of texture I like.
My next card is the card that I think I've for sure put in the most cubes ever. I mean, maybe set aside like fetch lands, maybe. But I have cubes a lot of fetch lands right now that I have this card in, which is Engineered Explosives. I have been on this card in my powerful cube since the very beginning, and every time I design a new cube, I'm like, this is just the perfect flexible answer. Let me actually read this card word for word so I do not mess it up like I did all these other ones. It's also always in a different place. Shout out to Julian. It's always in a different place on the curve in my cube, so I never know where to find it. Engineered Explosives is an artifact that costs X. It has Sunburst, so it comes into play with a charge counter for each color of mana used to cast it. And then you can pay 2, sacrifice Engineered Explosives to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Engineered Explosives. As a cube designer, it is so nice to be able to put in a card like this that any deck can play, that can answer basically anything, save for really expensive stuff on the high end on the curve, that also has all these other sort of like, you're always main deck Engineered Explosives. Doesn't matter what your deck is doing, doesn't matter, if you're aggressive or mid-range or control or whatever, you're always going to happy to play Engineered Explosives. And then it gives you that one answer to an enchantment in your like black-red deck or whatever. It gives you like the thing your deck needs, and pretty much always at like a completely reasonable cost. Like it's not a broken card, 100 Ornithopters aside, where you could argue it's broken because all the creatures cost 0 mana value, but a perfect answer, like a perfect like little toolbox. And it's actually hard for me to conceive of a cube where I like would not be excited to just put Engineered Explosives in.
Yeah, cool card. No notes. I mean, do you like context where you're like looping it with Tolarian Academy and things like that, or you like it more as just this like
Academy
straightforward?
Ruins.
Exactly that one. Yes.
I don't have a cube where I would be happy for people to be looping this with Academy Ruins, but if you are into that kind of thing, the fact that, you can rebuy your board wipe essentially, or your kind of pseudo board wipe, does give it a lot of texture. Maybe that texture is bad, but I just think this card is basically perfect.
And we have to give a shout out to the original Fifth Dawn art by Ron Spears, which is just incredible.
So good. I think I have 3 or 4 Fifth Dawn foils of this card now because of all the cubes I've put it in and because of how beautiful that card is.
That's a couple of hamburgers for that foil.
Oh, yeah. I didn't get them at that price, but
great strategy.
I'm investing. All right, next up is a card that I've also been considering for Bun Magic Cube in a way that I think will maybe shock people, and it's actually kind of similar to Fist of Flame a little bit. It's Kessig Wolf Run. This is a land, it taps for colorless, comes in untapped, and you can pay X red-green to give target creature +X+0 and trample until end of turn. This is actually kind of an insane rate for this effect. If you look at cards that give +X+0 until end of turn to a creature, they tend to cost X and a pip, either X and a green or X and a red more likely these days. X and a black in some rare circumstances, I think. But X and a red is generally what you're paying for like a one-time, cost you a whole card, give your creature +X+0 and trample to end of turn. I know because I've looked at all of these effects, basically 400 Ornithopters, and you get like additional benefits, right? Like Tyvar's Stand is a green one that gives hexproof and indestructible, but not trample actually, and it also does buff toughness. But as far as utility lands go, I think Kessig Wolf Run is like one of the most threatening things in terms of any kind of board stall or like, stalled game. Like you just get to cast Fireball every single turn basically if you have Kessig Wolf Run in play, which the cost of a land that does not tap for colored mana is real. And depending on context, that can be a very steep cost. But every time I played this card, I've been more and more impressed with the fact that its rate is just kind of nuts. Like, for a utility effect on a land, it compares so favorably to, like, actual full cards that do a similar thing. And I notoriously hate board stalls, as we can now talk about, as we've now recently addressed quite a bit. And this card is just so good in those board stall situations and ending games. I've also been really, really a big fan of including more trample enablers in my cube. I think chump blocks are a pretty common way to lead to board stalls, and I've activated this quite a bit just to pay green-red, tap it, give trample. Like, that is a...
Oh, that's interesting.
That's a reasonable mode if you don't have extra mana floating around that can also totally mess up combat. So this is in Take 5, it's in 100 Ornithopters, and I have genuinely been considering it for Bun Magic because it's really powerful, and powerful in a way that I like, because it, like, pushes games to a conclusion quickly.
Card is cool. I think it is generally underrated in terms of like power level and performance by both like players and cube designers who are considering them. How do you feel about it being a land that goes into a specific color pair, or at least you need to splash for it, but doesn't actually help you cast those colors? Like, it is a colorless land, and that is a cost.
Yeah, I think you just have to, only get so many of these in a given cube list, I think is what you have to think about. Like, I think it's a pretty tight budget of gold lands, essentially, where you're not going to play this unless you have both red and green mana in your deck, though it's a nice splash because it's not like the card doesn't do anything until you have red or green mana. It does tap for colorless. It's a waste. So I think it's just a matter of like, yeah, you don't want to include 6 of these cards in your cube that are, lands that don't tap for colored mana, but only go in decks that can produce 2 colors of mana. Use sparingly, I think it's like a reasonable thing, and you just have to conceptualize it the right way.
Right. I guess maybe that's just a tension for me where I'm thinking like, okay, here's a card that asks me to have both red and green, but also it is diluting my other mana sources, which like feels like, I don't know, I guess we could just frame that as a positive tension as well, as long as people are evaluating that correctly.
That is the knock on the card, for sure. Like, that is why it is not crazy when I made all the sort of comparisons to the like rate of cards that give you the same effect. But I don't know, every time I get to activate Kessig Wolf Run, I'm like, I just cast Tyvar Stand, draw a card, basically, because I didn't have to spend a card on it, and I just, put it into my Kessig Wolf Run. I do really think the upside is there, and this is a card that used to be played in powerful cubes for a long time and then fell out of favor, and I don't have a great explanation as to why, other than people got excited by newer, different stuff, but the more I play with this card, the more I'm convinced of how powerful it is, and the more I love games proceeding to a conclusion, and this card is really good at not letting players sit around with like extra mana and nothing to do with it. It's like an incredible mana sink in any kind of board stall.
Sure, and I'm in the same situation where it's not bumping toughness, and it's an on-board state, so you can, or on-board effect, so you can attack with your creature into the chump blockers, and your opponent, hopefully, your opponent knows like what the stakes are, and it's like, yeah, you can block, you're going to take some damage, they're still going to trade, and make your choice.
And the threat of activation means you also don't have to spend your mana on it many turns.
That's a great point.
You just leave it in play, you cast your spells in second main phase, and your opponent had to block differently because you had a Kessig Wolf Run, which really changes things.
Pretty cool.
It's a great card. My utility lands in the Bun Magic Cube are like just creature lands, which fill a similar role. Like, if you think about like a Celestial Colonnade, that obviously comes in tapped and taps for covers of mana, which if Kessig Wolf Run did, it would be insane. Like, if Kessig Wolf Run came into play tapped and tapped for red and green and still had this ability, that would be absolutely nuts. It's definitely worse for tapping for colorless, but, in your curve out deck, it does let you keep curving out, assuming you have the colored mana to cast your spells, which is a slight difference of evaluation. The difference of, pay 4/5 mana to get a 4/4 with Vigilance versus pay X red green to pump something, I think very similar. And pay X red green is much more cool to me because you can do it to your Dreadhorde Arcanist. You can do it to your creature with Double Strike. You can do it to your, whatever. Like, putting power somewhere else is like inherently a more cool dynamic thing than just making a game piece,
Dreadhorde Arcanist. You don't need to give me that much more to make me excited about that card.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a card I've been finding a lot of room in cubes for and been really happy with every time I get to play with it. My 5th card here, it's an old one. It's one that I would have said I liked years ago, but I think maybe what I've come around to is just accepting that I'm just more about the mentality of just like playing with the cards you like and like not worrying about like everything being sort of in a perfect, even power level band. But a card that I've been putting in more and more cubes and have been so happy to do so is Mystical Teachings. This is 3 and a blue for an instant. Search your library for an instant card or a card with flash. Reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, and it has flashback for 5 and a black. So 4 mana to cast up front in blue and then 6 mana to flashback in black. Narrow tutors are, I think, very, very cool cube design tools. We could do an entire episode about narrow tutors, and maybe we will, because I think there's a lot to talk about there. The fact that this can find any card from a specific subset of cards means that you are, I think, really encouraged to play this as a like toolbox card and not necessarily like a find your combo card, because your combo would have to be entirely consisting of instants for this to be like a really consistent way to find your combo. Though honestly, in some cubes, I do play it as a find your combo card, and I like it in that sort of context too. This is like a control player's wet dream, because it is 4 mana instant speed, which is expensive. That's a high mana value spell, but the idea is that you play it in a deck with a lot of other instants, and then if you ever get to a turn where you don't have to cast your counterspell or you don't have to use your instant speed removal at the end of your opponent's turn, you just get to Mystical Teachings to go find any card in your deck that is going to like give you a good answer in the given board state. I love the fact that it's very clean. It's like not a complicated card. I love the fact that it has off-color flashback. I think that is very cool. It's awesome to splash a couple black sources in your like blue-red deck to then, be able to flashback your Mystical Teachings, or have this as a payoff for being like full blue-black. I think it is awesome that this can get cards with flash. It is really, really cool this can get cards with flash, and it does come up. I play this in Sacred Geometry, and very often you're going to get Snapcaster Mage with this, which then lets you buy back any card you cast in your graveyard, and that little package is very, very cool.
You could even cast Mystical Teachings again.
Yes, you could. You could flashback Mystical Teachings for slightly less mana, but costing you your Snapcaster Mage flashback. That would not be a good line. I wouldn't recommend that one, but it is possible. Honestly, the biggest downside of playing with this in the cubes I played in is that I think one of the coolest things to do in constructive Mystical Teachings is cast Mystical Teachings to get Mystical Teachings, which is just generating then a bunch of late game card advantage because now you have more cards of flashback in your graveyard that you can then go get more instants with, which I play singleton cubes here, so you can't quite do that. But yeah, cool art. Clean card, and something that, like, I don't see myself putting this in Bun Magic anytime soon, mostly because I'm just, like, so chock-a-block full of blue cards I love in that cube. There's, like, really not space for it, but it is a card I adore in Sacred Geometry. I've been playing it in Take 5 and really loving it there. I'll give a little shout-out here to Waterlogged Teachings, which does not have anywhere near the swagger of Mystical Teachings, but this is the Modern Horizons flipped instant with a land on the back that the front side is 3 hybrid blue-black for just like casting a Mystical Teachings. You get instant or card of flash, put it into your hand and shuffle, and on the backside it's a tapped blue-black land. It's actually a much stronger card. Like, that could see play in Bud Magic Cube theoretically and not be, like, you know, completely outclassed. It doesn't have quite the swagger, but I'm playing both in actually a lot of circumstances now because I really just love this effect.
And a second Ron Spears illustration from your list.
Wow.
It is funny you mentioned this is like the control player's dream, because I know this is a card that is beloved, but I see it and I'm just like, this just seems so slow. Like, I could have already cast Botanical Brawler and those other cats by now.
You could have.
Instead of just spending 4 mana.
And you know what? You probably did, and your record is better because of it.
I don't know. But it is very cool. So I'll give you that.
It's really not an Anthony card, huh?
It's really not.
It just feels so good to resolve this card in a board state where you're like, I'm okay, I'm stable. Like, I'm not losing this game in like a turn. And then you just get to go and be like, well, what do I need right now? Do I need, you know, more card draw? Do I need a removal spell? Do I need a counter spell to prevent the next thing they're going to cast? It's going to be really good.
Yeah. Or am I going to be there like, what do I need a removal? That's a sorcery. Do I need a card? Oh, sorcery. That's creature.
Not if you're drafted the way I draft, buddy. I love to draft me some instants. So yeah, maybe consider Mystical Teachings for your cube. These are pitches for some cards that I think are very cool, Anthony thinks are very cool, and I think have homes in a lot of cubes. I do want to give a couple of quick shout-outs. I can't help but give shout-outs to some cards that
honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions for me. Reckless Charge. I keep finding places but Reckless Charge, and I keep loving it. 1 red mana for a sorcery, +3/+0, haste, and has flashback for 2 and a red. The threat of your opponent having a Reckless Charge in their graveyard, it just makes everything so scary. You're like, do I have attacks? You were Reckless Charge in the graveyard. I could just die at any moment. Lightning Axe is a removal spell I keep coming back to in cube after cube. 5 damage target creature, 1 red mana, instant speed, additional cost, either discard a card or pay an additional 5. Love that card. Great, like bone shards basically in red at instant speed, which is really, really cool. I keep finding cubes to put Eternal Dragon in. I'm not going to read the rule text on that one, but check out Eternal Dragon.
Is that the new one or the old one?
The new one.
The new one.
No, the old one.
The old one.
Timeless Dragon is much stronger and, you know, but it doesn't have the swagger of Eternal Dragon.
Of course not.
Eternal Dragon has, like, it's fully resonant. It's great. We love it. And then I keep putting Jeskai Ascendancy in cubes, and I don't regret it. I love that card.
That's your prerogative. I'll just give my one honorable mention. For some reason, I just have played Creekwood Liege like 3 times in the last couple weeks.
Creekwood Liege.
And
actually, do give me the rules text on that one.
I think it's cool. 3 hybrid green-black mana.
Is this the Indestructible Tree Folk?
No, not even. Other black creatures you control get +1/+1. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may create a 1/1 black and green worm token. So
now
basically
there's
an
an Anthony card.
That's an Anthony card. Love it.
Yeah, you can take that. I'll take Mystical Teachings.
Or not 4/4s. It makes 3/3s.
And you'll win. You'll beat me in the game. But I'll be casting Mystical Teachings, and you'll be casting Creekwood Legion.
I don't know if
I'll
that's
feel good
true.
about that.
You got me in Resplendent last week, right?
Did I? Did we play? Yeah, we did. I thought that deck was really good, and then I lost my other 2 matches. And
I thought my deck was okay. I kept putting dub on things in my Grixis deck because I had to, because that's the conceit of the cube. But it turns out sometimes you're just like, yeah, I have this unblockable creature, and I'm just going to dub it. Get knighted.
It was kind of weird to see you dubbing like Mercurial Spelldancer.
Course,
I'm like, Mercurial Spelldancer is like a crazy strong card.
This has never happened before.
And dub is like a, D+, limited card.
Yeah.
Was dub a little better in Dominaria?
It was okay. It was not bad.
We played a lot of that format, and it's starting to leave my brain.
I think I've got a box or 2 of that stashed away. If you
I was always just trying to play Saprolings, green-black Saprolings in that.
Same.
I also like the Wizard deck a lot. I was not playing a lot of dubs.
That funny moment is the conceit of that particular cube, and also like the thing that Cube offers. Like that's the opportunity of Cube, so I appreciate it.
Those kind of weird moments are exactly why I built Take 5 too. Like, I'm doing what now? Okay, I guess that's happening. Like, the thing I still keep thinking about is there was a match ended, game 3, the game was won by, so there was a player playing an eggs deck, generating a ton of value, and their opponent was more aggressive and had gotten their life total down, I think to like 8 or something, and then they hit the wall of now my opponent is like casting face reward turn over turn and getting it back with my card recall is getting really bad. People are going to listen to me, my brain turn to mush live on this podcast. Getting it back with Codex Shredder. Codex Shredder is a way you can go infinite with face reward because you can pay 5 and sacrifice it to get a card from a graveyard back to your hand. If that card is an egg, then it gets back the Codex Shredder. And if you could generate enough mana to cast the face reward and also pay to get back the Codex Shredder, you can just keep going over and over again with it. Anyway, this like more aggressive deck hit a wall, couldn't get any more damage in, and was like had a couple turns where they like played a land and pass, and their opponent was like, "No, I cast an egg and do this stuff." They took a bunch of game actions and drew a bunch of cards and went crazy. And it was clear that like the next turn, the eggs deck was finally going to like just have a huge swing for lethal, and then their opponent had just been playing lands and passing, and they play Eater of Days, the 9/8 flying trample. When it comes into play, you skip your next 2 turns, and they just cast it, and their opponent was like, okay, it resolves. And they're like, great, trigger resolves. I skip my next 2 turns. And then they played Song of Treachery, which is the threaten effect on the back of an MDFC, or the front side of an MDFC, just to give it haste. So they could attack and kill their opponent with it. So they got to 9 mana and then just cast an Eater of Days with haste.
I feel like I've done that a couple times with, a threaten spell on a creature with prowess, just like, I just need 1 more damage here, or a heroic trigger or something like that.
And on that bombshell, that's the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. You can send us mail to our P.O. Box, P.O. Box 4855, Baltimore, Maryland, 21211, and we can open those things on air. If you want to get something read on air, that's the way to do it, because we get a lot of emails, and I read most of them, and I don't respond to that many, and I'm sorry about that, but I do my best.
Email's tough. There's so much email in the world.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with it?
All the music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty, and the show is edited by Matthew. All the Magic Cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast, and this podcast is produced by Thinking Really Hard About Magic Cards. And then speaking into microphones about it, thank you, Anthony, for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thanks for sharing all those cool cards with me.
I do like these episodes. I think it's like the shallowest conceit of an episode.
Yeah, literally naming Magic cards.
Naming Magic cards you like, but I have a lot to say about these cards. I think they're cool.
Sure can just sit around naming Magic cards.
I mean, the arc of my like change of feelings about Fist of Flame over the years, like
that is genuinely incredible.
The card is so great. You know what else changed my mind about Fist of Flame I forgot to mention was Proph's Eidetic Memory, which is a card that is now kind of beloved, even in powerful cubes, as like a payoff for like,
which
Delver
is kind of
style
just like cast
cantripy
Fist
decks.
of Flames every single turn.
Well, it gives no trample, and it only gives counters for cards you drew beyond your first.
Right, yeah.
So is Proph's Eidetic Memory the better card? Probably, but like it's a very different. Like Fist of Flame is very explosive, just ends the game, whereas Proph's Eidetic Memory is like this kind of grindy engine. But yeah, I think the ascendancy of Proph's Eidetic Memory has also made me be like, hey, what about Fist of Flame? Bring that along with us. Get on these coattails, Fist of Flame.